When I started off, I wanted to create a handheld blood test that would help veterinarians to better diagnose at the horse's side. And I ran a study with 23 known biomarkers and a large population of horses, and we monitored these horses over a period of time. And what we saw is that when horses got sick, serum amyloid A was the earliest and most sensitive indicator of what was happening in that horse. Every research paper I read about serum amyloid A at the time told me that it was an inflammatory response protein. However, we had 52 cases of tying up in our study, and none of them had any SAA. So we were starting to consider that SA was a better marker of infection than of inflammation. So I went to one of the best internal medicine specialists in the world, Dr. Nathan Slovis at Hagyard in Kentucky, and we asked him to run a prospective study with us whereby he diagnosed horses as they came in the door of the clinic and I ran their blood. And what we saw was that horses that had infections or infectious conditions had highly elevated levels of SAA, whereas horses that had non-infectious conditions, even if they had severe inflammation, had no SAA. So we knew at that point that we'd made a discovery around SAA. We discovered that it does not always elevate when you have inflammation. And in fact, when we looked a little deeper, we saw that the kinds of cases that are non-infectious where you do get SA elevation are where you get antibody production, such as post-surgically or toxicity. You can even get an SA elevation post-vaccination for 3 to 4 days. So we were starting to think that SA was a better indicator of the host response than of the inflammatory response. So we wanted to run more studies and create a body of evidence to really prove that out. The first of those studies was run by Nicola Pisterla at UC Davis, where he and Molly Viner showed that you can very clearly distinguish between infectious and non-infectious respiratory conditions using SAA. So even with severe inflammatory airway disease, if it's non-infectious, you do not get an elevation of SAA. And since then, there have been a number of other studies on various other diseases that have proven and shown the same thing, that SAA can distinguish between infectious and non-infectious inflammatory conditions. I don't think it's any longer accurate to consider that SAA is an inflammatory response protein. I think it's much more helpful to consider that it's a host response protein. And when you put that into context, that you now have a tool whereby you can measure at the horse's side the host response, you can quantify that host response, and you can then monitor how the host or the horse is responding to therapy, well then that becomes a very powerful tool. And that is exactly what I set out to create when I started this company.